My name is Sam Polk, and I'm excited to tell you a little about the nonprofit that I run called Groceryships, which works at the intersection of poverty and food-related health issues, and also the social enterprise called Everytable that's making healthy food affordable for everybody. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little of my background, just so you know who's talking to you. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and from a very early age, I was incredibly ambitious. And so after college, I went to a place that a lot of ambitious young men go to, Wall Street. And I spent about 8 years climbing up the corporate ladder there until I was a senior trader for one of the largest hedge funds in the world. And then the crash hit, and that was my first awakening as far as understanding how what I was doing was connected to the rest of the world. And I'll tell you a story from those days. I was in a meeting with one of my billionaire bosses, who's one of the smartest guys I've known, and several other traders, and we were talking about the hedge fund regulations being talked about in Congress. And everybody in the room thought they were a terrible idea, but I sort of raised my hand and said, maybe they would be better for the system as a whole. And it was like this terrible moment, like the music had been turned off, and the room went silent. And my boss leaned across the table and shot me this withering glare and said, "Sam, I don't have the brain capacity to think about the system as a whole. I can only think about what's good for us and our business." And it wasn't so much that I judged him as I saw myself in him, and I understood that that's what had been driving me for so long as well. So after about a year of sort of wrestling with myself, I ended up resigning from my job in the hedge fund and walking away from Wall Street. And I wanted to get away from all the ambition and focus on success, so I moved to a place that has absolutely no focus on ambition, Los Angeles. And I spent the next couple of years doing volunteer work and writing a book, and then one weekend I went on one of those Netflix binge-watching sprees, and I was watching, all these food documentaries, Food Inc. and Forks Over Knives, and there was one in particular called A Place at the Table that was about hunger in America and how in the richest country in the world, millions of people don't know where their next meal is coming from, many of those children. And while that broke my heart, what blew my mind was the argument the film made about the intersection between poverty and issues like obesity. And it described the existence of food deserts where there's very little fresh food for sale and tons of fast food. I'll show you what that looks like in Los Angeles. This is showing some of the new healthy food eateries in Los Angeles. And you'll notice that they're at certain price points and certain locations. But there's an entire swath of the city that's left out. But fear not, there are restaurants that serve those areas and very profitably. Now, this hit me on a deep level. I come from a family that struggles with a lot of food issues. My dad has diabetes. My mom had the lap band surgery. I've got a younger brother, Daniel, that got to be 450 pounds, then had the stomach surgery, lost the weight, gained it back. And truth is, I struggle with food and eating healthy mostly because my favorite meal is like a dozen donuts and some privacy, But for me, it wasn't because there wasn't a grocery store in our neighborhood. There was. And that place in the red rectangle is a place called South Los Angeles, where per capita income is $13,000 a year, and life expectancy is a full 10 years less than places like Pacific Palisades, more affluent areas. So the first thing we did was we started a nonprofit called Groceryships that helps families living in food deserts get healthy. And how it works is a mom, usually, joins a group of 9 other moms, and they go through a 6-month program where they meet once a week for 2 hours. And in those meetings, there's nutrition education, healthy cooking skills, $30 worth of fresh produce each week. But importantly, those groups are structured not as didactic lectures, but as support groups. So they're led by people from the community who've been through the program before, and people sit in a circle, and there's a box of Kleenex in the center because a lot of time is devoted to talking about all the other issues that go into healthy eating that are often unaddressed in a nonprofit context, things like stress and depression and emotional eating and addiction and childhood trauma, family belief systems. And when you start talking about that stuff, people start crying. And I'll show you a little bit about what this looked like in the first ever group. It was held in a church bungalow on the edge of a church parking lot in South Los Angeles, and there were 7 women and me. One of the women was a woman named Helen Langley, and I met her when we were taking applications for this program. And I said, why are you interested in this program? And she said, I am a retired school teacher, and I live in a house with 5 kids. None of them are mine. They're all the children of my brothers and sisters who are drug addicts or homeless and live on the street. And I've taken in these kids. And these kids get to see their parents twice a year. On Thanksgiving and Christmas, the parents are allowed into the house. They take a shower and then eat a meal with their kids, and then they have to go. And she said that every time that happens, one of the kids will come up to her and say, am I going to end up like my mom? And Helen will say, no, you're going to end up like me. And she took the responsibility she had taken on so deeply, but she was getting sick, and those kids were getting sick, and so she wanted to get healthy. So we started that program, and it was, like I said, me and 7 moms, and I remember that first group explaining the nutrition education and healthy cooking and fresh produce, and people were really excited. And then I started talking about that sharing circle and talking about emotional stuff, and people were less excited. So much so that each meeting starts with what's called a check-in, where the question is, how are you feeling? And you go around the circle and answer it. And that first meeting, people gave one-word answers or passed, and there was actually so little participation that we had to end the meeting early. And that happened the second meeting as well. And it was happening the third meeting until it got to Helen, and she paused for a second and then looked up and said, it's been 20 years since anyone asked how I was feeling. And a tear rolled down her cheek, and she started to open up about what her life was really like and the stuff she deals with on a daily basis. The woman after her opened up about an abusive marriage, and pretty soon everyone in the room was crying. And that was the moment that a collection of strangers became a group. And we met there every day for 6 months until the end, when there's a lot of data for a nonprofit, and we showed incredible progress in terms of BMI reduction and increased fruit and vegetable intake and decreased fast food. But for me, what was really meaningful was the emotional changes and some of the things that the people said, like Joanna saying, this group has made me feel physically, mentally, and emotionally beautiful. Helen used to say, y'all are my family. She used to say that when she would come into the group, she would unzip herself, and then 2 hours later, zip herself back up again. And then possibly the favorite thing that anybody has ever said to me in my entire life was a woman named Joanna, 26-year-old mom, who said this. She said, I love this group because it reminds me that I exist. So that was in 2013, we did 1 group. The year after, we did 2 groups. Next year, we did 10 groups. And this year, we're doing 20 groups. And Groceryships is great. And nonprofits are tough, and it's hard to raise money. And if any of you would like to donate, please let me know. But it really is hard. And also, we kept hearing from a lot of these parents, look, I'm a single mom. I've got 4 kids and 2 jobs. And this cooking classes is great, but I need to get food on the go. And in that neighborhood, this means McDonald's. So that's where we go. So me and a partner of mine created a business called Everytable. This is how Everytable works. It's actually pretty simple. At a central commissary kitchen, some of the best chefs in the country, that guy in the back is the former head chef at Le Cirque, are creating these healthy, delicious meals. And these are not just any sort of healthy meals. These are meals that have been created with the head chef at Le Cirque and folks from South LA that are super authentic, super craveable, super delicious, like that's a Puebla chicken tinga with black beans and chayote peppers, our #1 seller. Jamaican jerk chicken with plantains and coconut beans and rice, also a huge seller. But the key is that at the commissary kitchen, they're packaged in to-go containers, and that may sound like a simple thing, but it's actually the key economic insight, and I'll show you why. Imagine a Chipotle. You walk in, it's 2,500 square feet of space, has 10 to 15 employees, fully built out commercial kitchen. All of that is pretty expensive, which is why Chipotle will probably never sell a $4 burrito. But if everything is made fresh every day, but packaged in grab-and-go containers, you can take them and sell them from stores like this, our first store, which is 600 square feet, has beautiful display refrigerators instead of a kitchen, has 2 employees instead of 10, and all of that leads to this cost structure where packaging and ingredients plus labor in the kitchen plus grab-and-go storefront labor and overhead equals $3.85. Now, we knew after penciling that out that that was going to be our cost structure, and we could have put just a 30 or 40% margin and had a good business and been the lowest price healthy food in that neighborhood. But on Groceryships applications every day, what I see is the following. Single mom, 3 kids, $1,200 monthly income, $750 monthly rent. it's hard to make it to the end of the month every month. Cupboards are bare. And for that mom, there's a huge difference between a meal that costs $6 and one that costs $4, whereas folks where I live on the west side are used to tender greens for $14, sweet green for $12. All those are great options. So we decided to implement a variable pricing model where we sell the food based on the prices of the communities that we're living in. So in South LA, the food is for $4. In downtown LA, for $8. Now what this allows us to do, thank you. The beauty of all of this is that we can have a single kitchen supporting dozens of stores, and it's making healthy food more affordable for everybody. So in the lower income areas, it's cheaper than McDonald's. In the higher income areas, it's cheaper than a lot of the other options. And because it's in grab-and-go containers, it's fast and it's convenient. And people in our first store are buying 10 meals at a time so that they can take them home and keep them in their fridge. And the beauty of all of that is then it creates this system where we all come together to make sure that healthy food is available for everybody. And so I'll end by just telling you what I think this business sort of means to me and why I'm doing it. Is you remember this guy and what he said, I can only think about myself and my business. And there's a lot of people in this country that think like that, and I am one of them sometimes when I'm choosing a place to live or a school for my kids. That's what I'm thinking about. At the same time, there's a lot of people that feel like Helen. It's been 20 years since anyone asked how I was feeling. And I'm here to say that those statements are related, maybe even causal. And for us, this is about this understanding, at least in my heart, that healthy food is a human right, and it should be available to everybody. But for too many people, it's become a luxury product. And so this is about, and I don't mean to be grandiose, but a business taking on the responsibility to say, we're going to make sure that it's affordable for everybody, and we're going to take on that responsibility because, in my mind, every life is equally important. Every neighborhood is equally important. And Everytable's tagline, every body, every block, every table. Thank you.